Oh, and we're in.
We're in and we're recording and we're live at the Blues Matters Towers or whatever it is. Welcome, Olly Overton, to the Blues Matters
Thank you.
chat. I trust that this finds you well. Yeah,
It does. It does. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for
good.
having me.
Good. You've recovered from everything in London before Christmas.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, that's all packed away and being mixed and mastered now, and Albert just finished kind of the first approval, so it's all looking good. It's all looking
It's all
positive.
looking good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Take me back to how did you get to be involved in the blues music world as it was, as it is?
Where do we start? Okay, so like most people that get into this industry and this genre, it started when I was younger. There was about 5 of us that went to school together, and we wanted to, be the Rolling Stones. We wanted to learn instruments and go out and do the blues. Luckily, we were given good influences in our parents, I suppose. The main one was my best friend Jake. His mum and dad and gave him a good education in music, and he used to have this really old dance set thing that he got from his nan.
A dance set record player.
And his fascination with records started there. And he used to bring all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff to my house, like Fats Domino, Willie Dixon, all these kind of really old blues cuts. And we loved the kind of that it was so different to what was around us. At the time we were growing up with music in the charts like the Kooks and everything else, and it was like the Indie Revolution, the Libertines, and we just thought that was cool, but it wasn't as cool as what we were spinning.
Yeah.
So that's what we got into, and then we went to a local youth centre because they had free rehearsal time on a stage with amps and drum kits and everything. We went, yeah, great, let's do that. And I wasn't really very good. I'll be honest, I wasn't very good at bass. I tried the drums. That came later. Guitar was just a no-go. So I ended up on harmonica. Jake said, you should just have a go on it. I think he took a bit of pity on me there. And I started learning, and I got on really well with it. So the next point, we got invited to a jam night at the Yardbird Jazz Club, and they had this open mic night, and we were all underage. We'd lied about our ages just so we could do the gig. I've got to get a drink. Sorry, mate.
No problem.
Give me 1 second. There's a lot of dust in the flat. Like I said, we've got building works going on at the moment, so...
You're swallowing dust.
I'm swallowing dust, and as an asthmatic, that doesn't really help.
Oh, dear.
So, where we get to, we all kind of lied about our age and decided we were going to go to a jam night at the Yardbird Jazz Club in Birmingham. Beautiful spot. Classic, dimly lit, full of veteran blues guys.
A sticky floor.
Yeah. And we got up there and they went, what are you guys called? And I'll never forget it. He was a big dude called the Wolf, and that was his kind of blues name. And he looked at us, what are you guys called? And we all looked at each other and thought, well, we haven't got a name. So we just went, we're the Yardbird Blues Band.
This is good enough as any.
Exactly, yeah. So they said, okay, cool. And we did a really good set. Well, we thought so. And they invited us back next week to be the house band. So we did that for a bit. And then Tom, who was playing guitar at the time, he went off and did his own thing. He got a really good trio set up, and he went off to do wonderful things. And we all kind of ended up doing our own little projects and working on that. But what got me was the kind of the other side of the curtain. The how do you make it happen? How do you make a band go from a bunch of players knocking about to releasing music? So I went to college and I studied music technology and music business and tried to put all that together. And I failed miserably at college. I'm a dyslexic, severe dyslexic, and it just wasn't for me the life of academia. But what I did learn there is physical skills, how to record bands, how to spot a good band from a crap band, what you've got to do to make it in this industry. And it isn't about being the best player. It's about having the all-round package, being someone that wants to jump in the van and tour the country for not a lot of money, but just get out there to play their music. And they're the real ones, and they're often the ones that crack in about 5 years or 10 years and all of a sudden go to stratospheric heights because they've put the work in. And I took that knowledge and then I joined another band, this time in the kind of progressive rock field, very different from my early days playing blues harp. And we got a record deal with Swordfish Records in Birmingham, and we got picked up by John Taylor from Duran Duran, and he wanted to put out our second record. And the band, as all bands do, the band politics, and I want this, and we should be doing this, and I'm not sure of the narrative, and all this kind of stuff. And we ended up breaking up and all that. But I handled all the logistics of the band, i.e. the touring schedules, the manufacturing schedules, making the vinyls, all that kind of stuff. So I'd learnt the skill set there. A couple of years passed, and I'd started doing kind of consultancy work with indie bands, trying to help them get cheaper packages where they could sell merch and go on the road with their merch. And that became a bit of a skill set, because I'd be able to design the artwork, I'd be able to look at the different manufacturing kind of quirks, i.e. the coloured vinyl and everything else.
So how old were you at this point, Ollie?
That would have been about 5 years ago, so 32, 31, 30...
So 26, 27?
Yeah, about 26, 27.
It's very young to be taking on that kind of role. You normally find people who've been in it for 20 years to do that. But do you think that the mindset they had, you picked all those little gems from being in a band that, wasn't very, so you learned something from that band, and then something happened at a gig. So you're picking tiny pieces of information up, aren't you?
Absolutely, and I think that's been the story of my career. My granddad always taught me that there isn't really such thing as a failure. There's just lessons. You know what I mean? I don't see things as a knock or that way catastrophic. Oh, that's the end of that. I just see it as okay. Well, what do we take from that? And I think that's been a blessing really for my career.
Yeah, there's always something to take from.
Yeah. In every situation, whether
it's
it
a
be good,
learning
bad.
curve. I found that I fell into this as a writer, literally fell into it. Didn't know what I was doing, hadn't got a clue. People probably say I still don't, but I had to learn on my own and learn quickly. And then you pick up little gems, and then you speak to somebody else, and then you see how that works. And so, it doesn't matter. You could have got a master's degree at college, or it probably wouldn't have made you any more successful than what you already are now, because you learn the hard way.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think people that can do that and go to university are extremely skilled individuals, but it just isn't for me.
No.
And I think that I'm a practical learner. I look around and see what's good in a situation and what can be developed, and I suppose that's my skill set.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the day-to-day running of things more than the actual planning 18 months ahead, or?
Okay, so the reality there is that my dad used to say, "Are you a starter finisher?" Because I used to have these great ideas. Oh, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and then how do you get from A to B? The middle bit is the boring bit, isn't it? Really, because once you think of the idea, you automatically go to the end goal, and you can imagine how great it's going to be at the end. What you don't realise is all the work that you've got to do in between. And I found that, to be honest, I found that this year, because end of 2025, the plan was to release or open 2026 with all these beautiful records that we've worked so hard on. But to get all them records ready for January was incredibly hard. But the idea I thought was so easy. Do you know what I mean? Oh, it's what musicians do. Let's just go record 9 albums and we'll start whacking them out in January. No.
What could possibly go wrong with that?
Exactly. So, but we've pulled it off, and it's been a real team effort. All the artists have rallied to the cause and look forward to a different way of releasing music, which is what we're trying to do. Because we just touched on how I got into Gulf Coast Records by Mike and Guy having this conversation, and me kind of talking with Guy off the cuff, and then ending up being taken on to do the European work. Then we fast forward to 2024, where I'd been doing a lot of tours with the Blood Brothers in Europe and Mike, solo in Europe. And a real friendship was born there, because before it was just Zoom calls and you could only go so far with that. And jumping in a van with a dude for 30 days, you get to know a guy,
Yeah.
And we got on really well. And the conversation we had was, how do we step up our offering in Europe? Because these guys, COVID was over now, and they could come back over, but had the industry recovered enough to warrant a tour? Because you can't fly from America and do 5 dates. It doesn't cost. It doesn't break even. You go home poorer than you came, and that's not the point. So we looked at ways of making this bigger. One of them was going over to Germany and working with the German PR team at V2 and opening our offering there. And it really worked. We started to get so many more shows, and we started to get so much more reception in the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany. And Mike does a lot of like Norway and obviously the UK. So the things are working in Europe, and we were cooking on gas. And just a kind of a little footnote in this, that I shouldn't say a footnote really, because she was she's so integral to the Gulf Coast story. This was set up by 2 partnerships. You got Guy and his wife Lou, and you had Mike and his wife Laura, and they both set this up in Port Arthur in Texas on a cruise as an idea of helping artists maintain their publishing, maintain their integrity and artistic freedom to record what they want, and to start building a family of recording artists. That was the mission. Laura contracted cancer and lost her battle.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And the issue that we were then faced with is that Gulf Coast Europe had started to ascend into something really strong, but Gulf Coast North America Laura ran Gulf Coast North America. So with no one really at the helm apart from Joan Malatides and Mike, it was tough, because who's doing the body of work? Mike's on the road a lot, and Joan was basically, she handled our websites and media, she handled our social media, she handled the office, and she handled the artist liaison kind of role. And we held it down, but it wasn't going to be future proof. We needed to strengthen up that offering. And that's when Mike kind of said, well, do you want the hot seat? Do you want to do what you're doing in Europe, but do it in America as well? Which is a big undertaking for someone of my age. I was 31, just turning 31, I think, 31 at the time, and I was like, okay, well, this is a great thing for me, but can I do it? Because my past history is I'd say yes and think later, but I had to.
Yeah, but sometimes that can be a blessing, because if you say no and think about it too long, the opportunity, you'll talk yourself out of it, instead of like jumping in with both feet and go, I've got to sink or swim here. Yeah. And and if you don't know something, somebody will, so you ask them. That's how I'd be. But I can understand it must be a huge undertaking to be running the European operation and the North American operation.
I had some amazing help. Joe Manatides has been at Gulf Coast since its inception in 2019, 2018, and she really took me under her wing and showed me the ropes of the day-to-day office stuff in America and what they were dealing with. And we kind of worked relentlessly for a year together to batten down the hatches and make sure that the ship was ready to sail into the future. And for that, I can't thank her enough. Mike has also been, Mike's always at the end of the phone. So, if ever you haven't got to make a decision on your own, you can always call Mike. And also Guy, who lives just outside of Birmingham, not too far from me at all, and he's always around day to day to handle any problems as well. So it wasn't all on my shoulders. I had a great team around me, and that was worth its weight in gold. And then came the point where Mike and Guy decided to make me a partner instead of just a managing role. It was a partnership in the label, and I think that for me meant so much more than just a promotion or a job title. It was, well, you're in this now. This is just as much yours as it is ours. So let's rock and roll together and see what we can do.
So were you like? Sorry to interrupt. Were you like managing director, and then they said, "Come and be part of the actual board of directors"?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was that, and then I kind of got given the title of label director, and I was enamored by that. And a bit like when we were speaking in Abbey Road, when you came into Blues Matters, and you walked into a team of peers and they accepted you and then elevated you, and now you all hold this thing going together. It's an honor in a way, isn't it? Because you're working with
Oh
good
God,
people,
yeah,
and
it is an honour.
so that for me meant so much. And then the trust element of, these guys have built a business up for the last 5, 6 years now. And then they've said, well, it's over to you now, kid. Right. Okay.
Yeah, no pressure then.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, I kind of thought, what do I want to do here? And we looked around at different areas of the blues community, and one thing that struck me more than anything is how truly transatlantic this community is. And it's been like a ping pong table. The blues has gone from America to the UK. We've kicked it back to America, then they're bringing it back over to the UK,
Mm.
in Europe in general. So give me one. Sorry about this, Steve. I've just got to let someone in the
Don't
front.
apologise, please.
Yeah. So, like I said, we wanted to hone in on the idea that this is transatlantic and who's celebrating that. Because you've got the Blues Federation in the UK, you've got various blues awards and foundations and stuff like that throughout Europe, and then you have got the big Blues Foundation in America, in Memphis. But none of them really work in tandem at all. So how do you
I always thought that was weird. Yeah.
yeah, there's no like governing blues body. I suppose the biggest one is the Blues Foundation, and they do a mighty fine job of celebrating the blues all around the world. But none of them work together. A lot of the artists, wouldn't understand. If we're playing in America, they're huge in America, but they haven't gigged in the UK yet. And you think, well, why? How's that happening? So my idea around Gulf Coast is to try and bridge that gap, to try and make it possible for artists when they're on our label to tour Europe and to tour America and have their stock in both places, and to be able to really work their records when they want, where they want. The next phase was, we've just closed the 2025 season. What are we going to do next year? Who are we recording, and what's the plan? So that led me to Memphis for the Blues Awards last year, to kind of look at what's new in the music industry, the blues music industry, and touch base with the artists that we currently have. And that's what we did, and it kind of worked very well. And we picked up some great signings. First I met Gabe Stillman, who was an absolute amazing chap, and we met on Beale Street. You can't. It's so iconic, the kind of meet. You kind of bump into this dude, and
Yeah.
he was there in this red tartan jacket, and I was like, wow, okay. And yeah, just speaking to him, he was like, yeah, I've just finished cutting this record, and I don't really know. And he didn't know who I was from or who I worked with,
Yeah.
and all the rest. And it was just a great conversation. I went, give me the record, let's have a listen to it. So we had a listen, and he said, well, I'm playing this jam night down the road. I says, oh, my mates, Albert Custodia's playing there. He says, oh yeah, great, cool. So we all went down, and the guy just picked up his guitar and he ripped it. It was great. And I went, well, you're on the books then. Great. And we had a chat, and he was really, happy with the idea of coming and joining Gulf Coast Records. So that was one down. And then, we needed to fill the roster with some iconic artists that we wanted to make a statement with. And the Blood Brothers have been doing so well lately. It's untrue. They're playing great theatres and venues all across America. But Albert and Mike are two very respected individual players, and we wanted to celebrate their solo careers just as much as their iconic Blood Brothers union. So we decided that we'd do two solo albums, one for Mike and one for Albert, and they both had really good ideas about what they wanted to do with that. Mike decided that it was time to return to his home in St. Louis, and he wanted to make a record that celebrated suppose the life he's got, and also after doing the album Life Is Hard, his last solo record, which was really him grieving the loss of his wife, he wanted to celebrate the life part.
Yep.
He's still around, his kids are still around, and he's got to make a good life for them, and celebrate the joys in the everyday, I suppose. So that's what Mike did. And he went and cut a record in St. Louis, and it's exactly what you'd expect from vintage Mike Zito. You know, it's fun, it's high octane energy, and he makes you think. So we got a fantastic record there. Then Albert. When I was touring with Albert in 2023, we used to talk a lot about. He surprised me with his knowledge of UK culture. Full stop. Whether it be food, sport, kind of our bands, you know, he's even got shares in Manchester United.
When I interviewed him at Abbey Road, he was telling me about it. I thought, how does he know all this about, you know? But
Yeah.
he's really clued up on English culture, isn't
he? He's really tuned in. And I said, well, you know, you never cut a record there. And he said, wow, I'd love to come over and record. He's just, you know, making that happen with schedules and everything else. I said, okay, well, you know. So we tried for a couple of years and it never kind of worked out. And luckily, there was a break in the Blood Brothers schedule in December 2024. And I said, I know it's close to Christmas, but shall we shoot our shot? And he says, yeah, okay, sod it, let's do it. And obviously, you know, we really tried thinking about where, how, why. And he came over to Birmingham and we hung out for a bit. We worked on the material, and, you know, he's a big fan of Black Sabbath, generally, you know, from their early roots in blues right up to the metal gods that they became. And he wanted to come to Birmingham to kind of pay respects. And with Ozzy passing, it just added so much more weight to the trip.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, it struck that we were going to do it. If we were going to pay homage to the Brit blues sound, then there's only one place to really cut this record, and that was Abbey Road. So the idea came from Albert, and he looked at me as if, is this possible? And like, you know, again, part of my character is everything's possible. You know, let's try and make it happen. And it, you know, we did. And Abbey Road were great working with us, and we bugged the studio. We came into a couple of scheduling challenges because there was another guy in another studio recording documentary.
Yeah, we weren't meant.
Yeah.
Well, no, you can mention that chap if you. No, that's not a problem. But yeah.
So Sir Paul was in Studio 1, and that was contested. So we decided to settle for Studio 3. No worries. But yeah, you know, that added also to the trip. It made it a lot more special knowing that one of your heroes.
A lot more dynamic knowing he was there at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot more toilet breaks happened. I noticed everyone popping out into the corridor and just trying to look just in case.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we cut the record, and it sounds amazing so far. You know, we've got a great producer on that, Dave Gross. Yeah. So that now we've got Gabe, we've got Albert, we've got Mike. Then through Albert's wife, who is Michelle Castilla, one of the best radio pluggers in the game, and she came to me with this album from a guy in British Columbia, Canada. Who'd have thought the blues stretched that far, right? And she went, you got to check it out. It sounds like a winner. It sounds like something that it's steeped in heritage, but it's like his second album. And I was like, let's have this. His name was Garrett T. Willey, and an old head on young shoulders is the way I describe his sound.
Yeah.
Because he's a great mix, you know, and he's clearly inspired by a lot of the people that we all are, you know, whether it be the Stones, you know, the AC/DC, you know, old school folk blues recordings. You know, he's got all of that, and he's managed to amalgamate it all into this album. So we spoke to his management, Eli Wenner, and they were really excited to come on board the Gulf Coast and for our plan to release early on and make a good go of it. And so now we got 4. Then we discussed with Kelly Baker the idea of, she'd done an absolute amazing EP, and it turns out that EPs aren't so well recepted as a format within the blues community. You know, it's an album-based community.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, the reviews are fantastic. Her live shows are amazing. You know, she's supporting Kingfish, Samantha Fish, ZZ Top. You know, she's out there killing it. Then why would we wait to do an album? She's got the material. Then why would we wait? So we decided, okay, let's do it. let's do an album with Kelly. And Kelly's going to cut that down in Nashville. Then, just going back a bit, we decided that the Bone Shakers, when I was on tour with them, they have this beautiful midsection in their set where they strip back the electric instruments, pull out the acoustic, and they say, right, we're just going to break it down for a bit. And they do about 4 songs, and they are encapsulating. They pull the audience into a place where you could hear a pin drop and everyone's hanging on every word. And I said, we're up in Colin Campbell's neck of the woods, up in Edinburgh at the Voodoo Rooms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that can be a hardy crowd to win over, but they did it. And the whole pub went from chatting and talking kind of around the music to, yeah, okay, right, well, that's done something. I said, wouldn't it be good if we kind of tried to track that somehow, somewhere? So Jenny lives in Nashville, and the parts are laid down, and we got about 4 or 5 songs, and then the rest have kind of come together slowly over December and the rest of it, and we now have an album ready. Pull Up the Roots, and it's nothing like the Bone Shakers have ever released before. It's not the usual sound. It's not the usual instrumentation, but it's still them, and it still commands the power of Randy Jacobs at the helm and Jenny Langer's amazing vocal, which is great. Arthur Thompson on percussion, and Arthur, he's an incredible musician because he teaches drum workshops in Africa and has educational programs within Africa, and his whole thing is he's not a drummer. He plays the drums, but he also plays anything else that makes a noise. You know what I mean?
Just lying around.
Yeah, and he can make it sound amazing. To the point where I think we were in Holborn in London, and he mic'd the floor up and started tapping the floor at one point, and nobody realised that he wasn't playing the cajon. He was playing the floor, just tapping, And then Holly Montgomery, what a woman. She commands the bass, and she's the backbone of the Bone Shakers. So
I've always liked the Bone Shakers. I thought they're a great band.
Yeah,
they really are.
They're rooted in blues, but take it somewhere else.
Yep.
So that led us to we got a couple of albums, and that was Garrett T. Willey, Gabe Stillman, Mike Zito, Kelly Baker, Albert, the Bone Shakers. And then also in Memphis, I spoke to a Gulf Coast veteran, Mr. Kevin Burt, who performs 9 times out of 10 as a solo artist. That's his preferred style, He's a storyteller. He likes to pull you in, give you a story, and let you sit on that for a bit. That's his unique kind of appeal, I suppose, because you walk out there feeling like you've just been to therapy, I suppose. You come out thinking
Dylan-esque, would you say?
Yeah, to an extent, it's that storytelling
the
ability.
Blues type,
Yeah, And Kevin said to me, he was like, well, I've done two records at Gulf Coast, and they've both been fantastic for me, but they've both been with full band arrangements. And it occurs to me that I don't really do a lot of full band shows because I prefer to do it me and the audience, He's an inspirational speaker, as well. He's done a TED talk. He's done all this stuff. He does a lot of educational workshops within Iowa to help young people understand what the blues is and also how to access that, and music in general. So the conversation was, well, why don't you do that? Why don't we cut a record that is just you, a guitar and harmonica, what you're known for? And what, if you can get that magic from the stage and put it on a record, that's great, but it's easier said than done. If you strip away all the instruments, can you still get that sound? And he ended up working with a great producer called Michael Cutsforth, and the only way I can describe these recordings are, it feels like you're in the room. It feels like you can hear the air moving between the strings through the harmonica, and you've got this great voice that just commands attention, and you just hanging on every word. And I can't wait for that to come out, that record, because it is special. It really is. And then talking about harmonica players, Jason Ritchie down in New Orleans, he got some material he put together because his drummer had unfortunately passed away. And 13 Hours, John Perkins. And that was kind of like, how far are we? Where are we going? How long's the drive? 13 hours. It's always 13 hours, right?
Yeah.
So they decided they want to do an album that's dedicated to the memory of John, but also a little bit of a state. I call it the State of the Union address. You know, he's setting out his shop on what he thinks, and he's fairly unfiltered in how he says it. You know, whether that
there's nothing
be
wrong with
politics, day-to-day life, you know, love, loss, and everything in between. It's Jason really just opening up about it all. And that was an incredible piece to receive because I didn't know that was coming, you know. It was, I've got something. Can we put this out? Well, yeah, actually, yeah, we can. So that landed straight in the label's lap, and wow, what a record! You know, again, you listen to it and it takes you on a journey, which all good albums should.
Yeah.
And then closing it off in October is a British band. You know, like I said, we do want to put out music that isn't just American artists. And there's a great band called the Sharpies. Phil Mead's bunch, and what a kind of blues supergroup they are. You know, when they go out on the road, they play with Billy McSkimming from the Yardbirds, and they've got all this kind of pedigree between them, dating right back to swinging '60s London. And they got this album, and I said, okay, well, we can put it out for sure. You know, what's your plans? And they've got some tours coming up, and we had the album mixed and mastered it, and it sounds fantastic, but it is that kind of maximum British rhythm and blues. It takes you back to '70s London. When it's kicking and you got all the greats knocking around. That's the vibe of this record, and it's a great heritage piece to whack into this catalogue for the year.
So you've sort of covered every single part of blues and blues rock. You know, from like say from being stripped back like Kevin Burr to you know so you've covered the whole genre. You've got your hands around everything, which I think is great. You know, and you. I know a lot of the bands that you've got on there, and I've seen them and I've heard them, and you've got a great bunch of artists on your label.
I think so.
Everybody can say that, you know. It's all right for people to have 8 or 9 artists on one label, all doing extremely good stuff. That's very, very rare.
Do you know what? It's interesting because when you look at the industry as a circle, it's a bit of a nightmare when you look at how it's all meant to work, what people need. So you start with the artist. The record label will say, we're ready to do another album with you, or vice versa. The artist say, we want to do a record with you. Go, okay, fine. The label puts investment in. The artist puts lots of time and effort and their material in. And then you end up with a set of recordings that sound great, lovely. Then what do you do with them? Because that isn't the end. That's just the start. And the artist goes, okay, let's whack it out next week. You go, no, can't do that, mate. Yes. Okay, so then you offer it up to a distributor, and the distributors will say, what's their touring schedule? Or what's this look like for the artist? And what's their 12-month plan? I don't know if you've ever met many artists, but they don't have 12-month plans. They have, what's 3 weeks ahead of them. You know what I mean? So
yes,
you have to start work on that. And then, so the distribution wants a lot of dates and schedules, and they're forward thinking. And the agents want to know when the record's coming out and where it's going to be. Start clashing, because how do you get past either of them? You can't get the gigs for the album tour because you don't know what's going on with the distribution, because the distribution want the album tour. So again, you've got to look at all of that. If you can bypass both of them and make it work, the agent's going to get a tour around the album, and the distributors are going to give full backing. In our case, we work with Universal Music Group and Virgin. So they have to like the record and are willing to put the time into that record. So that's what us as a label do. We fight for that. And if you can get all through that, then you've got to sell the thing. You've got to get it to the people that want to listen to it, and you want to try and crack a marketplace where it's not just about consumption and it's not just about buying records. It's about actually engaging in an artist and trying to listen to what they've got to say.
Which is partly where we come in.
Absolutely. You
interview people and you tell me about your rep. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you can get up to that point where it's out, people are reviewing it, and then people are buying it and watching you tour, then by the grace of God, you've cracked it. But
Yeah,
from concept to marketplace is incredibly difficult, and
I
we've
know all
got
about that.
yeah
I deal with that a lot of the times. The in between people.
yeah
That's where your
it's not-
problems lie sometimes.
absolutely
And I'm literally going through this over this last week, trying to get hold of somebody, and somebody's. It's extremely difficult.
yeah yeah.
Yeah, so I know
Uh,
exactly where you're coming from there.
my
So do you?
God,
So
sorry.
when? So do you wait for an artist to have an idea first, and then you say, right, we'll make this work for
Yeah,
you?
I
Is
think
that
this
how
is.
basically Gulf Coast works?
Yeah, we always, again, like I said at the start, it's about artistic freedom at Gulf Coast. If an artist has got an idea and they want to record it, then hands off, let them do it. If that artist comes up to us and says, I'm having a couple of problems, what do you think? Then I'm more than happy to put my input in. But the one thing I said we'd never do is if an artist comes up to us with a record and says, oh, what do you think of this? Who are we to say we're not going to put that out? Or, oh, we don't like that. We don't like that record, but go take it back and redo it. Or something. We're just not going to do that
Yeah,
because if we've signed an artist that we've thought they're good enough to hold their own weight in this arena,
it's
so
a
we're there to
partnership.
back
It's
them.
working together,
Yeah,
isn't it?
we're there to back them. We're not there to tell
Yeah,
them what to do, in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's why we have created a family of recording artists now.
I think. Yeah, well, I
Because
think you've cracked it, mate. The approach that you come with, and obviously you're working in tandem with Mike, so you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, aren't you?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
the artists are bought into that, and you just go, right, crack on. And
yeah.
then when you were ready, when it's finished, then we take over and we do our bit.
I was incredibly lucky with Albert because Albert and me cooked the concept of how he was going to record and where, but it's his music.
Yeah,
Apart from one track, Albert plays a big part in my career because I never forget when we were on tour in 2023, I was talking to him about, home life, I was getting engaged at the time and all this kind of stuff was going on. And he went, is this really what you want to do? And Albert pulled back the curtain on it all and went, listen, you're on the road for X amount of days of the year. You're not going to become a millionaire doing this. Is this what you want to do? And he was always honest with me about what the blues industry is and this life that you get into. But he supported me into this transition and I supported him with this record. But he also gave me another great opportunity by, I write a couple of lyrics just for fun, really. And Albert took a set of my lyrics that he got access to and was like, I really like this. Do you want to work on this track together? And it's the first time I've ever kind of worked with an artist of that caliber.
mm,
You know what I mean? I mean, Albert is multiple Blues Award winner.
yeah,
He's had Billboard top tens. He's had Billboard number ones.
mm.
The guy's got nothing left to prove. You know what I mean? He's ticked the
Yeah,
box.
exactly. Yeah, but it's nice that he wants your input
Yeah, yeah.
on a basic level.
And this is a beautiful part of the new job and the role is that you end up working with all sorts of. I mean, it's like I was working with Jason Ritchie and his wife Caitlin on their album artwork, and we were going back and forth, and we were just moving little parts and playing and stuff. But that's a great interaction. It's not just okay, great, thanks,
Mm.
that's a ticket, and off it goes. It's a collaboration all the way through.
I always think about, like, I know it can be hard work sometimes doing what we do, but it's not a job when you
No,
enjoy
no,
doing what we do.
I don't wake up and think I'm going to work.
No,
No,
I don't. No, I don't. You wake up thinking, "Oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that," but it's not work.
yeah.
No, it's no.
It's an addiction, is what it is.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, we're never going to get rich, but I can look back and go, "That was me. That was great. That was a great part," and you
Yeah,
could do the same. And
yeah, yeah.
it's uh,
It's like the other night. I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife turned over, and I got my laptop open in bed, and I was inputting release schedules with the distributor at Proper. And she went, "What are you doing?" And I went, "I just got to get this done, just so I
yeah,
can tick over." You know what I mean?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Sometimes I'll be sitting there and watching TV, and she go, "Who are you talking to?" 'Cause, like, see the cogs turning in my mind.
Yeah, yeah,
It's an
yeah.
idea or something I've got to do, though. Make a note on a piece of paper. Yeah.
Absolutely. But you know, as a label, I'm thrilled to be where I'm at, working with the people that I work with and having the team around me. You know, hopefully, you know, this year is setting out our ambition to what we want to
Yeah.
become as
This is
as
what
a
this is
label.
what you're all about, 2026.
2026, yeah, we're it's our opening gambit into the new kind of day-to-day at Gulf Coast, you know.
Yeah.
So January marks an
Mm.
interesting time for us because the last 2 weeks of January we are releasing singles from Monday to Friday. The last 2 weeks of January, and that's a single off every album that we're releasing this year. And to my knowledge, I might be proven wrong, but that hasn't been done.
No.
Nobody's opened up in January and said, "These are all the albums that we're putting out in the year, guys. Do you want to get involved? If you want to pre-order them, you can pre-order them. If you want to have a taster of it, listen to these singles. We're really setting it all out in January so people can join the good ship Gulf Coast."
Well, I think you've gone about it in a great way. To me, it doesn't sound. It is hard work getting to the stage where you've got at, but it's a simplistic idea. It's not rocket science, is it?
No.
But it you know, it's hard to get everything, get all your ducks in a row. But
Absolutely.
the actual idea is not terribly difficult.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. It's about having access to it because you know there's some things I hate. You know, it's like when an artist will say, "Oh, exciting news coming tomorrow," or you know, all these kind of check out the socials in 2 days' time. Well, you know, who's going to do that? Nobody nowadays because the internet's flooded with stuff like that. The reality is they want to hear something because the best thing for an artist to promote themselves with is their artwork. And for us, we wanted to get something out in January to give someone a taste to let them go, "Come, that's different. We haven't heard them like that, or that's going somewhere. Oh, I'm going to check that out." You know, and
I think you've hit the nail on the head, mate. You've got it right. Do you envisage signing other artists?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're closing the book on. I can't physically get any more releases in because, you know, Grammy submissions that they end in August, and we're already doing 2 more records than we probably ought to, or should be doing. But the reality is that to get everything recorded, I now know really I've got to have all my albums ready for 2027 by mid this year, you know, by summer. So yes, we're putting them out and we're working our 2026 catalogue, but at the same time, we're about to start thinking about 2027.
2027.
You know, and it's you know, looking at what artists are out there and looking at what artists want to work in such a way instead of this. I don't know when I'm going to put a record out, or I don't know what's available to me as an artist from the label. We're trying to break down them boundaries, be a bit more transparent, and make a simplistic pathway for music to be released into the marketplace.
Well, I think that your 2026 artists and your 2026 releases show that you're on the right track. You've got things right, and I'm really pleased that Blues Batters can work with you all the way through the year and hopefully carry on.
It's a fantastic, you know, magazine, and you've supported the label no end, you know, over my tenure, let alone before me. So, you know, for that we are tremendously thankful.
Like I say, it's a pleasure for us to work with you and to work with so many artists, and we know what's lying ahead. Instead of somebody go, by the way, and they give you 2 weeks' notice. I want an interview tomorrow.
Well, we were that label. We you know, we were.
I know.
You know, we were that label.
You know, somebody will say, I need my artist interview tomorrow. Well, I haven't even got can you send the album?
This is
no, we haven't got the album yet.
You know, when you've got that circle, that release circle, and everyone's dictated to by somebody else. The artist wants to release then, the label wants to release here, the distribution want to release all the way down there, and you know, you've got to set out your shop somehow and break that cycle, and that's what we're trying to do here, because really, you know, everything is just getting harder for an artist to perform and to do what they want to do. Forget the rest of it. It's about performing to people and getting our artist message across. Now, we're trying to get rid of all the rest of the gubbins in the way. You know, stuff in the way is what we need to eradicate, and make that path easier for our artists. If we can do that, fingers crossed, you know, but that's our mission.
Yeah, well, that's your plan. Yeah. Make things easier. I mean, You know, when you think technology as it is now, everything should be this easy. You find that, like you've said before, the in-between bits make it so difficult. I mean, I've got no hair to pull out, but it drives you insane at times. You know, when you think, just talk to somebody, but you're on the right track. And I'd like to thank you, Ollie, for speaking to me. We've been on live for an hour, actually.
Have we? Okay.
Yeah, and it seems like 10 minutes. You know, it's been a really enjoyable chat, mate. We wish you all the best. I just know you're going to succeed in 2026. This is your year. This is your year, mate.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, I've got 9 artists around me, plus incredible bands and everything else. You know, we're going in with a really strong team. So you are talking to me now, given, but really I'm the voice of everyone else in the background that's pulling in and driving this thing forward.
Yeah, you're the face of the team.
At the moment, yeah. You never know.
No, you're doing a good job, mate. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.